Who doesn't like biscuits? Everyone likes biscuits. Biscuits are amazing. But what if you just wanted to do something a little bit special? It's coming to Christmas, New Year's, whatever holiday really. What if you just want to do something special for yourself, for someone you love, for someone you care about, for someone you don't care about if you really wanted to be mean and give them a delightfully inappropriate cookie? What I'm getting at is, what if you wanted to make your own shaped biscuits? Like these. Isn't that delightful? These are the open source hardware logo. And I'm going to show you how you can make your very own cookie cutters in any shape that you want. Let's get started.
Let's begin on the design process for a cookie cutter. So the first thing that you're going to need is a picture of what you are making a cookie cutter of. Typically it's the easiest to find a black and white or a very highly contrasted picture of whatever you're doing. For instance, we're searching for the open source hardware logo. Now, unfortunately, just a picture is not going to help you all that much. What you would need is a vector picture or a DXF or a SVG, and typically the easiest way to create a DXS or an SVG is to use Inkscape. What you want to do is open the picture in Inkscape. Keep in mind it does need to be a heavily contrasting image for it to work the best, and you're going to want to go to Path and Trace to Bitmap. Then what you're going to want to do is realize that you're being an idiot, select the image, and then do OK. Then you can delete the raster image, and now you have a vector image of the file. Then what you're going to do is to just export, if you can find the export, or save as, and save as SVG. Then what you're going to want to do is to go to Fusion 360, that is my designing program of choice, import the SVG that you just created, and then you'll get a nice vector drawing of what you want to make a cookie cutter of. And then what you want to do is to struggle to try and find the scale option, but then remember that you want to see how much you need to scale by. So you want to see how big it is right now. Right now it's about 85 millimeters big, which is a pretty good size for a cookie cutter. Although considering this one's round, I'd recommend a little bit smaller because these ones did come out quite big. Then you're going to scale it and then realize that 85 millimeters is actually perfect, but you could scale it there up or down to whatever you want. So next you want to select everything, and then you're going to want to make an offset. Wait for your computer to lock up, because when you're working with vector images or big vector images like this, it can get a little bit slow depending on your computer. One thing to keep in mind is that when you are doing an offset like this is going to be for the main cutter part of the cookie cutter. You're going to want to do it as a multiple of your nozzle diameter. So if your nozzle is 0.4 millimeters, you're going to want to do it 0.8 millimeters or 0.12, whatever multiple of your nozzle it is. That'll come out with the best results. Then what you want to do is use the offset tool again, and you want to make another offset. so that you get the base of the cookie cutter, so you have something to, one, keep some structural rigidity, and to give you something to push down on when you're actually cutting out the cookies. About 5mm worked well. It depends on how big your cookie cutter is. If you're making micro cookie cutters, you're not going to want to make the base 5mm. Then that's pretty much done for all of the sketching. Now you're going to want to actually start extruding the parts of your cookie cutter. Usually I start with the base and I extrude it downwards so that the sketch is still on top of the model. Then you can easily select it, and then I usually go with about 8 or 10 millimeters in height. That usually works out well, unless you're making really, really thick cookies for some reason. This works out well. So there is your cookie cutter. As you can see, it's actually surprisingly easy to do. The biggest hurdle with any of this is really just the biggest hurdle with all of this is actually just trying to find a good black and white or highly contrasting image to make your cookie cutter out of. The rest of it is actually fairly simple. One thing to keep in mind is that if you cannot find that, there are other ways to do it, but I won't be talking about those other ways in this video. Basically, the other ways would be hand sketching out alongside a image of the cookie cutter that you want to make. I can do that in another video if anyone wants me to, but this is the easiest and simplest way. Next, what you want to do is to go into your slicer of choice. I like Prusa Slicer. When it actually does decide to open. Then what you're going to want to do is basically just import and slice as usual. One thing to keep in mind is you want to set your nozzle diameter to exactly what your nozzle is, and not to, like if your nozzle's 0.4, you don't want it to be set to 0.41 like some slicers like to do. But then there you go. As you can see, because we've done a multiple of our nozzle diameter, the wall is going to print nicely with just 2 layers. That means that it's not going to do any weird kind of infill between the lines that's going to come out messy, because in my experience that just doesn't come out nicely. Then you can just export it and print. Now, one thing that I have made a couple cookie cutters before, but I've never actually, at least not since I was about 10 years old, made cookies. At least not ones that I cut out with cookie cutters. So I had to just do a quick cookie dough recipe, although that usually just comes up with edible cookie dough, so a cookie recipe. As you can see, this one here by All Recipes is the one that I used. It worked pretty well, got no issues with it. There you go. If you do actually want to use the specific recipe I used, this is it right here.
Now that you've learned how to, with a 3D printer of course, make your own biscuits, there's a couple things I want to say just at the end. One thing to keep in mind, very importantly, is be mindful with the kind of plastic that you're using. If you're using PLA, or I wouldn't recommend putting any 3D printed plastic into the dishwasher, but if you're using PLA specifically, when you're washing it, when you're done, keep an eye on the temperatures of the water that you're using to wash it. Anything above 60 degrees will cause it to start to warp and give issues. Even 50 degrees really can start to give issues, so just be mindful. If you're using ABS or PETG, it's less of an issue, but just be mindful about what temperatures you're using to clean these. And also, I've just used this as a silly example because I'm very much for the open source hardware initiative in 3D printing in general, but you can literally take the design principles for what I've done and do just about anything with it. But at the end, you do still have to know how to make cookies and put the delightful cookie cutters that you've just made to use. Or you can give them to a friend or sell them, or I don't really care, but this is how you make them. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you found it informative, and I hope if you do have a 3D printer, it'll be something cool to give to people for Christmas presents or birthday presents or whatever. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.